All right, so here we are, dude, with part two. It's very rare that I book a guest on the podcast already knowing that we need a part two. It's like, I just know from consuming your content, there's no way we're going to get it done in a 90-minute episode.
Yeah.
So for those listening, we'll put the show notes for this one at lukestorey.com/Brandon2, the number 2, and then you'll find the past episode that we just put out a few weeks ago, or a couple weeks ago, at lukestorey.com/Brandon. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of things today that are probably going to require a lot of show notes and links, because I know your brain is like a vault for codes and statutes and things, which I don't think I would ever be able to remember. So when we drop things like that, Jared's going to be taking notes and making sure that we get as much as we can into those show notes, because people are going to want to verify it when they hear the crazy shit we're about to talk about.
As they should.
And that's one thing that's great about your content, like on your mostly video content, is you'll say something that sounds totally outrageous about, income tax, or what is a U.S. citizen, or what is money, some of the things we're going to talk about. And it would sound nuts, except there you are looking on Cornell Law or Black's Law Dictionary. You're like, boom, it's right here.
Yeah.
SJC 7456-2, boom. And you can look it up and it's really there. That's what's crazy about it.
That's pretty wild, yeah.
So here's where I want to start, because I think we framed in part one, the way I recall, was kind of like talking about identity and location, which I think was kind of a new way that you explained that.
That's the new way I explain it now.
So we don't need to go over that. A lot of people listening are going to have to go back and just listen to that one, because we're about to get into the weeds a bit more here. Just because selfishly, the weeds is what I want to learn about.
Okay.
So let's start out with what is money, and that the preconceptions and errors people have in their thinking about what we call dollars, money, currency, notes, etc.
Yeah, if you look up the definition of money in Black's Law, it says that it's normally gold and silver coin. It does say paper money, but it would be kind of more along the lines of a gold certificate or a silver certificate, mostly. It says that it does not embrace notes, real estate, and other evidences of debt. So a Federal Reserve note means promissory note. So a Federal Reserve note would not be embraced by the definition of money. It would be part of the does not embrace notes section of the definition of money. That would cause a Federal Reserve note to not be something that would be classified as money. But if you look at the definition of currency or funds, those words do say in the definition that they do embrace notes, bills of exchange, evidences of debt. So money would be gold and silver coins, or loosely some sort of representation of gold and silver coins. But if you study the founding fathers, they weren't too fond of paper money. So I pretty much just say money is gold and silver coins. Because really, if you take the time to understand all this, and you take the time to really go down the rabbit holes and really define everything, and you really understand what the founding fathers were trying to do and everything, that's pretty much what I think they would say if they were here. And I think it's actually the best way to define money, actually, for the benefit of actual people that are going to be having to deal with it or use it. If you do include paper money in the definition of money, it just opens the door to all the craziness that we currently see. It takes 100 years to get it that far. But if you close that door and you say money is gold and silver coins, it's a protection mechanism. It's like a security. It's like a electric fence around that definition that prevents that definition from turning into the nightmare we have now. And then currency and funds, the definition of currency and funds embraces all the evidences of debt. So it would embrace Federal Reserve notes and promissory notes and bills of exchange. And then U.S. dollars, as far as I can tell, there's not really any very good definition anywhere, really. As far as I can tell, the definition of U.S. dollars would be only two things. It could only be a promissory note, or it would be a bill of exchange, because negotiable instruments are only two things. They're either a promissory note or a bill of exchange. So as far as I'm concerned, U.S. dollars are just those things, because if you study in the United States Code what they say about gold and silver coins, it's just very loopy. It's very, very loopy. It's very difficult to understand. And I don't think anybody else understands it either. Even if you were to bring it up, I don't think anybody would be able to like really totally figure it out. So I think and then if you look in like, for example, the Federal Reserve periodicals, they say, I remember someone showed me an article where they said that the definition of lawful money has never been defined by Congress. That's just ridiculous. That's just their way of being ridiculous. Lawful money is gold and silver coins. And then legal tender is negotiable instruments. US dollars is negotiable instruments. And negotiable instruments are only two things. Unconditional promises to pay, promissory note, and unconditional orders to pay, which is a bill of exchange. As far as I'm concerned, it's that simple.
So going back to where, to antiquity at this point, where we kind of veered off of the rails in terms of sound money, there was a time when you would have gold and silver coins, right? Like go back to England or Europe or early America. And so if you wanted to go buy some bread or a horse, you would bring the equivalent amount in gold or silver. And then at some point, maybe 1913, the Federal Reserve Act or whenever it was, people didn't want to carry around a bunch of coins, right? So then we have a bank that stores real live gold and silver, and then they give you, say, a dollar bill that is backed by that gold and silver, and now you can carry that dollar bill around. You go buy the bread or the horse with dollar bills, but there's some intrinsic value backing them up. They represent real value. And then at some point, we deviated from that system and have what we have now, this fiat currency that I think many people listening are probably aware that the Federal Reserve just creates what we call money that's not real money based on the actual legal definition.
Just promises.
They create it out of thin air. And so essentially what we consider to be money is a falsehood. And so
we consider evidences of debt to actually be money.
Right. And so that means that
a promissory note is evidence that someone has promised to pay something they haven't paid yet, which means that it's evidence of a debt. And a bill of exchange is an order to pay that hasn't been paid yet. I order you to pay $600 whatever by whatever date. That's a bill of exchange. When you get that from your utility company or your mortgage, they're saying, you need to pay blah by blah date. That document, especially if you don't rebut it, because if you don't rebut it, then it becomes real in law. You've agreed with it. You've agreed that you owe this by this date, essentially, right? So it's evidence of a debt. So how can money be evidence of a debt?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So if we are holding a collective fallacy about what money is, then if you owe money that's not real money, you don't really owe money.
Well, the thing is that there's a couple things on this. First off, you can go on Google and you can look up a silver certificate or a gold certificate. And the word certificate is a really interesting word. If you look up the definition of the word certificate, it means like evidence that something else is somewhere else. It's like a representation of something else. So like, let's say I promise to pay you some money and I put this as collateral, right? On the document that's the collateral for this ring, I could say that collateral document is a certificate in relation to this ring because it represents the value of this ring. And if I don't pay it, then this ring is collateral and it can be taken. So the word certificate actually means like represents or shows or proves that something exists someplace else, essentially, right? Now that's a little scary because then you think of what is the title that you have for your car? So it's a certificate of title, which means that it's not a title. It's a document that shows that there's a title someplace else.
Right.
But you also have silver certificates and gold certificates. So if you go online, you type in silver certificate or gold certificate, Google will show you photos of currency from the 1800s. And it's a dollar bill, and it's got a lot of the similar things we have now. And it says silver certificate. And a lot of them even say exchangeable for $1 silver. And you could actually go into, I don't know where, probably the treasury or whatever, and you could just hand them 5 single silver certificates, and they'll right there at the window give you 5 silver coins. It's instantaneously exchangeable, right? Now, they had that for a long time. So the last time we had full-blown gold and silver coins, I don't know when it was. Probably the early 1800s. I could be wrong, but I'll just assume that. Because they were using gold and silver certificates even through a lot of the 1800s, right? So the thing is that loosely, those would still be considered money, but that's if you're a definition purist. If you are a philosophical purist, I'd probably say it's not. It directly represents money, but is that paper in itself money? That's debatable. I would say no, because I'm on a philosophical level. But if you wanted to go just purely off the definition, I suppose it would be.
A lot of people now, I think, are aware of the trickery around the moniker Federal Reserve. Right?
Yeah.
When you're a kid and you see that on a dollar bill, you think, oh, that's like a branch of the government or something, right?
Yeah.
And then I think as conspiracies have come to light, and many of them, unfortunately, proven themselves to be true, a lot of people realize that the Federal Reserve is a privately held bank. It's a for-profit bank, a corporation, right? And it somehow seemed to usurp the government's management of what we call money and currency, and the whole economy basically is now controlled by this private entity that many people still think is part of the government that they vote for and pay taxes to and all of that. So what do you think, if you could like wave a magic wand and take us back to money that actually has intrinsic value and is backed up by something? You know, many people like going back to the libertarians, like Ron Paul, abolish the Fed and the Fed, like they just want to get rid of the Federal Reserve. What would be your solution if you could wave a magic wand and change the way we interact with money?
I feel like it's not my job to tell people what to do with the information. It's simply my job to tell people the truth of what the information is and what options they have and what I think maybe will happen, and then whatever happens, happens. I don't really care. I personally intend on, if you go on Google, you type in OC-10. It's an OC-10 agreement. So the way it works is, let's say you have a promissory note for a car, and you're going to promise to pay, blah, 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 and you sign it, right? That promise to pay is now a full-blown promissory note. Now, what the banking institution does is they take that note and they go to what's called the Federal Reserve discount window, which you can look up online. They have a whole website. They have a whole thing on, it lists every single banking institution that currently has window access. It has a list of all the people who are currently requesting access who have not been given access yet. It's all totally public information. They have what's called the OC-10 agreement. You can download copies of the OC-10 agreement and fill it out. And at the end of the OC-10 agreement PDF, it tells you all the different documents that you need to submit with your OC-10. When you submit the OC-10 and you submit all the documents with the OC-10, then you're going to go on the requested access list. And then I went through that list a couple times, and it looks like it takes 3 or 4 months for them to finalize your application, and then you get Federal Reserve discount window access. As far as I can tell, anybody can fill out an OC-10 agreement. And the way it works is that the way that the Federal Reserve works is that original promissory note that you sign when you sign to promise to pay for your car, that is called, the Federal Reserve calls that the collateral security on the loan. And then the banking institution writes up what's called an application for notes, which you can find a lot of information about that at 12 USC 412, application for notes. You can also find it in the Federal Reserve Act, Section 16. It's called Note Issues. I think it's subsection 2. So the way that works is that they write up an application for notes, and they use this promissory note as a collateral security. And then the Federal Reserve gives them Federal Reserve notes on behalf of that collateral security. And if you read the OC-10 agreement, a lot of what the OC-10 agreement is talking about is the handling, storing, exchanging, and what they can and can't do with the collateral securities. That's like 85% of the OC10 agreement. You can look it up and read it for yourself. Collateral security this, collateral security this, collateral security this. What you can and can't do with that, how they're stored, and can you leverage, and how much can you leverage, and how does that? It's just like all this information about what you can and can't do with those collateral securities. Now, the thing that doesn't make sense to me about this whole thing, and I intend on learning more about it, is when you sign something, it's called an endorsement, right? And what happens is you're signing with a blank endorsement on your original promissory note, which means that you're releasing it without any conditions at all. And that's how the banking institution gets it. And then they put a different type of endorsement on it called a special endorsement. But what's funny is when they claim that the value of that security after you essentially give it to them for free, it's actually not theft. If you endorsed it with a special endorsement and then they took it and then they exchanged it, that would actually be considered theft legally. But because you didn't state a payee on the signature and you signed it just with your name, it's technically not theft. You basically release the document to anyone who wants it. It's payable to the bearer. Anyone who grabbed that document after you signed it could have went to the Federal Reserve window and exchanged it for Federal Reserve notes if they had an OC10 agreement. So what it is it's not really theft. It's just like very, very careful, very quiet, just like waiting for you to just give it to them for free.
Well, that's the crazy thing as I learn more about this, and just broadly speaking, for lack of a better term, common law, right? Just the idea that you do no harm and that you're honest and you don't swindle people or physically abuse anyone. It's the golden rule, right? I mean, that's like the kind of law that I am happy to abide by versus codes and statutes and all these laws that are just made up to entrap us. But the interesting thing about all of this to me is, it's all voluntary. It's like, it's not necessarily, I mean, there's deception, of course, and depends on like how far you go up the pyramid, just speaking of the matrix as a whole, but it's like more lies of omission than commission, right? So you apply for a mortgage or to finance a car, and they're just like, yeah, we're all set, Mr. Storey, just sign right here. They're not telling me, oh, by the way, you're going to do a blank endorsement, and then we're going to take that instrument and we're going to trade it on the stock market and make a bunch of money on your signature. They don't tell me that. So it's kind of up to me to learn that from someone like you or other people teaching this information. So it's they're not lying, but they're just not telling the whole truth, or they're not being overt in terms of what the offer is and what the contract is that you have agreed to enter into. Because we're happy to like sign all these contracts with the government.
The fraud part is the lack of terms of the contract. Lack of terms of the contract that greatly assist them and greatly harm you. And that's essentially where the fraud is located. Because the thing is that if you would have known that you could do a special endorsement, you would have done it. Anyone will do it. Even within like an insane person would probably still do it. Even like a drug addict or a psychotic or somebody who's banging their head against the wall. It would only be a small percentage of even the insane population that would still use a blank endorsement.
If they were made aware of that.
Yeah. So it's like, it's so insane that even most of insane people would still use a special endorsement.
Well, in terms of contracts, I remember reading somewhere in my studies, I think there were like 7 elements that make a contract valid or something. Yeah. And one of them was a meeting of the minds, where the terms of the contract are known and very clear to both parties entering into the contract. So in the case of these blank endorsements and loans and debt and all of this, it doesn't meet that criteria because the person signing doesn't realize what they're actually signing away.
Yeah. So the way that it works is, what's interesting though is that if you look at the blank endorsements, I have a bunch on my website that I found from people who went and requested all their documents and they sent them. It always says without recourse. Without recourse means that once you process this, you can't come after me for non-payment or anything. So they're holding these collateral securities. They're writing an application for notes. They're going to the Federal Reserve discount window. They're getting Federal Reserve notes, but the endorsement on the contract is without recourse. So do they ever have to pay back that original loan to the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. That was my next question.
I don't think so. Without recourse means that they're not paying back the loan to the Federal Reserve.
Okay, so I'm going to get you to explain this like a 5-year-old. In the case of financing a car, right? So I go to the dealership, they approve my credit. Yep, you're all good. Sign right here, Mr. Storey. They take that negotiable instrument with my blank endorsement. They take control of it. They go get Federal Reserve notes from...
Well, they put the special endorsement on it first.
The special endorsement stamp, okay, and then the CEO or whoever signs or whoever, right?
It's usually just there's like an
admin?
funder,
Okay.
or it's just, there's always some underling that works for the CFO or something, and they have some particular title.
Got it.
Like funder or...
So they take that instrument now to the Federal Reserve. They get Federal Reserve notes, what we broadly call money erroneously. Then they start billing me every month to pay that, but they already got paid. So are the financial institutions...
As far as I know, they get paid the full maturity value.
Including the interest.
Of the promissory note, yeah.
And so are all these financial institutions that are lending money for student loans, automobiles, mortgages, et cetera, are they getting paid twice? Once by the Federal Reserve window and then again by us making our payments?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And that's why banks have the tallest buildings in every city. I mean, I've observed
that's also
that.
why there's inflation.
Okay. Because the Federal Reserve, like someone has to get paid somewhere, but we're in a usury debt kind of system. So the Federal Reserve, who's giving those Federal Reserve notes to the car dealership, they're just creating, a digital representation of value out of thin air. And so,
I'm not even sure how that works either, because it's a financing company that's called Ford Finance. But at this point, with all the trickery and craziness going on, is Ford Finance even a part of Ford?
Right.
I don't know.
Right.
For all we know, what if it's a joint venture between Ford and Bank of America, and it's a corporation called Ford Finance, and it's not even a part of Ford at all? It's actually a part of Bank of America. I have no idea. No idea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But so if the bank's getting paid twice, or whatever financial institution, BMW Financial, that might be partnered with Chase or whatever, the thing that always gets me is like, okay, if you follow the breadcrumbs, like, who's losing the money then? You know what I mean? It's like the Federal Reserve is paying the institution.
The consumer is.
Okay.
Because the thing is that if you were to put a special endorsement on that original promissory note when you turned it in, then the banking institution ends up just becoming a currency exchange. It's like if I'm in France and I have French francs and I go to Hungary and I want to transfer the currency that I have from French francs to Hungarian whatever, there's a small transfer fee that I will pay to a currency exchange. You are literally exchanging the currency, which is the original promissory note that you originally signed, which is currency or funds by definition. And you're swapping that currency for a different type of currency called Federal Reserve notes, because people don't know and they don't accept the paper currency of the original promissory note. But for whatever reason, just straight up brainwashing, they do accept Federal Reserve notes, even though legally they're both the same thing in law. And legally, you can send someone a promissory note, and by law, they have to accept it if they're statutory.
It's crazy.
They can't tell you. No one can tell you that you can only pay with. They can say we only accept U.S. dollars, but the thing is that U.S. dollars is unconditional promises to pay and unconditional orders to pay. It's not Federal Reserve notes. Federal Reserve notes is just one type of unconditional promise to pay, and there's infinite types. There is no this type of promissory note, this type of promise. No, any note or anything where there is an unconditional promise to pay anything to anyone at any point in time would classify as U.S. dollars.
Wow. Okay, so say I want to go finance that new car, and I'm aware of this information of the blank endorsement of just signing my name like a dummy. I learned from your course that I'm still digesting. It's a lot of information. 39, what is it? 39?
39, yeah.
Days, yeah. I made it like halfway and then life happened and I got to get back into it. But
it's all good.
It's a free course, by the way, you guys listening. I mean, I know your business model is like all the low-hanging, high-value fruit is free. And then if people want to play at, big dog level, then it's a lot of money, like Dan Pena model,
Yeah,
right?
that's my favorite. Yeah.
Everything's free until you want to go to his castle and hang out with him. Then it's 50 grand or whatever, right? So high value, highly recommend your course.
I'm a big devotee. He says mentee and devotee, right?
Yeah.
I'm a devotee of. I mean, you could say I'm a mentee, but I don't have any direct contact with him. But I have so much engrossed in his teachings, and I'm just so obsessed. I was for many, many years. I haven't really done much with Dan Pena for a long time, for a few years at least. But for years, 3 years, it was just all I did was follow his stuff, and I've watched every single video of every single seminar he ever posted, which is so much stuff. It's unbelievable. All the way from the very beginning of what he posts, all the way up through like 2020. And I've read Your First 100 Million, which is a free book that he wrote and gives away for free. He gives the audiobook away for free and the PDF away for free. He wrote that book in like the 90s. And I've read that book probably 30 something times at least. And I don't usually reread books. So yeah, my whole model is based off of his model. And he's so funny. He's like, he explains why he has the model. He's like, I have this model because I don't have any obligation to any of you, blank, blank, blank. And he has all sorts of colorful things to say about that, right?
He's funny.
But he's just like, F you, I don't want to hear from you. Don't call me. Like, you didn't pay me. Like, he's like, the best thing about giving away everything for free is that I don't have to deal with you effers. He's very clear about how much he enjoys the lifestyle of not having to, I don't need your money. I like that so much that I decided that's what I wanted for my, and come to find out, it's also very, very interesting because legally, when you're not commercial, you're completely immune to anything legal.
Yeah.
Like, I have absolutely no legal liability for literally anything.
We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
And I'm not that familiar with his work, but for some reason, when I started this brand and this podcast, I followed that model just intuitively. Everything's free.
Yeah.
The only thing I didn't ever do is have the high tier, high ticket offering. I don't have any offerings. I'm like, so I love it. I'm missing something there.
Yeah,
but anyway, getting back to your education, which again, I highly recommend. We'll put it in the show notes at lukestorey.com/Brandon2 with the number 2. But in your course, one of the things you teach amongst the hours and hours of really high value, very dense, but super entertaining content, and you guys, he'll be there in a mankini, just wilding out. It's amazing. But one of the things you teach is how to do a special endorsement, right? So again, going back to buying the car, financing the car. So if you are unlearned, you go in there with a blank endorsement and now they're getting paid twice and you're getting hosed. If I were to follow that, and I'm sure it's not every situation the same, but let's say one learns how to do the special endorsement, without recourse, pay to the order of, yada, yada, yada. If you walk in a dealer and they're like, cool, everything looks great, Mr. Storey, sign here, and I sign it like that, what I picture happening is I slide it across the desk, they look at it and they go, get the fuck out of here. Like, you can't sign it like that. We're not giving you the car.
No one knows that signature means endorse and that there's all these different types of, there's a qualified endorsement, there's a restrictive endorsement, there's a special endorsement, there's a blank endorsement. These are all different banking terms, depending on how you sign. And like I said on my 10-minute How to Have Infinite Money video in 10 minutes, what I recommend everyone listening to this show to do is you actually replace the term signature in your mind with the word endorsement. You
like
never say the word signature
again. Like the back
again.
of a check, it says endorse here, pay to the order.
Well, that's ENDORSEMENT.
Okay.
I say you replace it with what UCC Article 3, Uniform Commercial Code Article 3, which is all about negotiable instruments. They spell it INDORSEMENT. I believe that when you're receiving, and I could be wrong, this is just purely from a lot of experience, and there's really not any clear delineation between the two. When you're receiving a negotiable instrument, it's ENDORSEMENT. When you're creating and exporting a negotiable instrument, it's INDORSEMENT. But I'm like 90% sure on that. But if you replace the word signature with the word INDORSEMENT in your mind. And every time you see that word signature, you just replace it. Just you could even cross it out and write INDORSEMENT. Endorsement. You would write endorsement, right? It's going to be big. It's going to be huge, because the thing is that whenever you sign anything that's a negotiable instrument, which is either a promise to pay or an order to pay, you are endorsing a negotiable instrument. And the way that you endorse that negotiable instrument, with a qualified endorsement, special endorsement, restrictive endorsement, blank endorsement, all depends on what the banking institution can and cannot do with that instrument. You control what the banking institution can do with the instrument. Now, if you write a restrictive endorsement or a special endorsement on a negotiable instrument, and they take it and they just do what they normally do, and they just don't even do anything, and then they send you a bill, that would be purloining negotiable instruments and it's all 20 to 25 years in prison. It's all felonies. You can start putting people in prison left, right, and center.
Wouldn't they just, okay, so I hand that contract that I've endorsed properly to the car salesman. He's like, cool, I got to run this over to finance.
I don't think they process it there. I think it goes into it, because we have a lot of reports of people getting calls like a month later. And it's by like a lower level person, and they say, there's something wrong with the way that you signed your documents.
Yeah, I bet.
Can you come in and re-sign it? And we ask them, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with the documents? I don't know. I was just told. They have no clue. The people who call, who say that you need to come in and re-sign your documents, they have absolutely no clue why the signature is incorrect. Not a clue.
So are they going to then try to repo your car and cancel the contract?
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes, I mean, if it were me, I would say, great, yeah, let's schedule a time. Go down there, sign it exactly the same way.
And if that special endorsement...
Now, keep in mind, you're actually signing two different negotiable instruments at that point too, though. That's also interesting. So you're paying for it once with a special endorsement, and then now they want you to come down and re-sign it. Now you're going to pay it again with a special endorsement.
And if that gets accepted and they go trade that negotiable instrument in at the Federal Reserve window, they got paid. So I'm assuming then that would bring the balance that they say you owe for that card to zero.
Well,
Is that how it works?
No, it goes into the negative.
Oh.
Because what about the maturity, all the maturity information, all of the interest, all of the... So if the car was $32,000, and with interest and payments and everything else, the original promise was $48,000, you're going to have a $16,000 negative balance on your account. Now, the way I look at it is this: they can keep the interest as a payment for the service of exchanging the currencies, which is still way more than they should be paid. I mean, if you really want to be more honest and more fair, what should be happening is that the car is fully paid off, plus you should be getting a check for, let's say, $14,000, and then you pay them $2,000 as a service fee for swapping the currencies.
And so take that $32,000 car. Let's say that it cost Toyota $10,000 in labor and raw material to make it. Okay. And so the rest of that is profit for them. When they take that to the Federal Reserve window, they're getting paid for their hard costs plus the profit they're making. So they win, and everyone that works for them that built the car gets paid, and all the people that manufacture the various components of the car. And at the end of that is the Federal Reserve essentially just creating money out of nothing. And that's where that money's going.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So the banking institution that is interfacing with the Federal Reserve, they're the ones that are sucking everyone dry. They're the ones that if you did the special endorsement, everyone's still going to get paid. The Federal Reserve is still going to operate the way that it operates. The car dealership is still going to get paid. The banking institution is going to get paid whatever amount you'd like to pay them as an exchange rate fee, whatever it is that you negotiate. Plus you get your car, plus it's paid off, plus really you should be getting paid for buying the car. Technically.
Wild. What about leases?
Well, you promised to pay the lease.
So you do a special endorsement or restrictive endorsement on the lease?
I don't think a lease has like interest payments and stuff like that on it. I've never really signed a lease. So I would assume a lease would just discharge clean. So if something discharges clean, then if you wanted what's called adequate consideration in order to have a contract, you would need to negotiate a service fee with the banking institution. So let's say it was a brand new, really, really nice BMW M5. And you would sign the lease agreement with a special endorsement. And then you'd say, hey, I still have to pay you guys. Because the thing is that in order for us to have a contract, you're going to be doing a service for me by going to the Federal Reserve discount window and swapping this negotiable instrument for Federal Reserve notes by doing an application for notes as per 12 USC 412. In order for there to be a contract, there has to be adequate consideration. You haven't gotten paid yet. So let's work out a service fee that I can pay you, and you just pay that out of your pocket. So the lease would be free, and then all you'd be paying for is just the service fee.
Interesting.
So let's say it's a 2-year lease for a brand new M5. I mean, at that point, you might as well buy it. Because if you buy it, then the interest gets rolled in on the promise, and then now there's more value in the collateral security than there is in the entire value of the loan. And now you don't need to ever pull any money out of your pocket ever, because there's always going to be a surplus of negotiable instruments. Because by the time that comes back from the Federal Reserve window, there's so much interest there that you can pay them very, very handsomely and still have a ton of money to stick in your own pocket.
Shit is so wild.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's really good to give references of these codes and, the UCC and all that. Because I know people are listening going, this can't be true. Like, you know what I mean? Like the world can't work like this, but it's because we're in a debt system.
Well, the banks are like these gluttonous black holes, and they take all the money from all the negotiable instruments, plus all the interest, plus they collateralize your business, plus they collateralize your home. They want your home, your business, your bank accounts, your gold, your silver, your guitar. They want your cups. They're just these like gluttonous black holes. And they're like never satisfied. They're literally like this endless black hole of trying to literally collateralize everything in your entire life. Everyone knows that. It's like you don't go to a bank and then just like collateralize like just a teeny bit. They want to collateralize everything they can possibly get their hands on. But the thing is that none of that is required, because the original negotiable instrument is the entire collateral. It collateralizes not only the entire value of the loan, but a huge surplus on top of the full value of the loan. So one of the things that I do is I write up orders and I send them out to mortgages or credit cards or whatever, or anything that's secured. And I say, look, this is no longer collateral on this loan because the original collateral security, it has more value in it than the entire value of the principal of the loan. So the car or the house or the jewelry or the whatever is no longer collateral on the loan. And I hereby order you to release security interest on these particular items. Well, they freak out. They completely freak out, obviously, which is hilarious, by the way. Because the thing is that if you have a private irrevocable trust and you put all your stuff in a private irrevocable trust, they can't get to it anyways. So when you issue these orders, you say, these are no longer collateral. Plus, they're in a private irrevocable trust. Now they're going to totally freak out because there's nothing they can do. Absolutely nothing they can do at all whatsoever. They don't stand a chance. So the thing is, at that point, what are they going to do? They can try to repo things, hoping that you'll never litigate. At that point, they start doing really illegal things. And that's when a lot of really serious felonies come into play, right? Now, the thing is that if you're not willing to fight that and litigate against that, they may litigate against you. This is so prevalent and it's so common that they're committing all these massive felonies at that point. That's when the felonies begin. So like, when you sign the blank endorsement and you're paying and everything's hunky-dory, there's actually not necessarily anything technically illegal going on yet. But when you say, this doesn't benefit me, why didn't you tell me about a blank endorsement? I want a special endorsement. Why is it like this? Why, you start asking questions and you start to, especially in litigation, because in litigation you can move into discovery. And in Discovery, you can start asking a lot of questions, and you can do depositions where you put people in small rooms, you put lights on them and cameras, and it's under oath, and they can go to prison if they lie to you. And that's always, I can't wait. That's going to be, I mean, there's very few things in this world that I like more than women, motorcycles, and the idea of a deposition. I haven't done a deposition yet, but I'll tell you right now, I in my mind, if I had to choose between sex and a deposition, I'd probably do a deposition.
Wow. You're definitely wired different. I would be happy to live the rest of my life and never see the inside of a courtroom, never talk to a judge, never talk to a policy enforcer, aka police officer. I don't want anything to do with them. But I understand at a certain level of this game, if one chooses to play the game in the way that you describe, litigation is part of that game. And I guess that's where someone like you comes along, a non-bar card attorney, in fact, right?
Attorney in fact,
that can, represent someone who wants to do this, but doesn't want to actually do all of the work themselves.
Well, we don't represent people. We assist people to present themselves.
Got it. Okay.
An attorney at law represents you. You're just a child or a retard. Literally, there's a legal definition for retard, which means somebody who can't handle their day-to-day, like basic things that you need to live. They can't have like basic social interaction. They can't answer mail. They can't do like simple, basic. That's like the legal definition of that term. So for people who might get a little triggered by that term, it's literally a legal term. It actually has very serious meaning, and it actually is very important in the legal world, because if a person cannot handle themselves, they become a ward of the court. You take on an attorney at law, which is a bar card attorney, you become a ward of the court. That's why it's called represent. So you represent a ward of the court, but an attorney, in fact, doesn't represent a ward of the court. They are assisting another person to present themselves as an adult, as a like non-ward of the court. And that's the difference between an attorney, in fact, and an attorney at law. And you can look all that up online. There's even articles literally on the American Bar Association website, which is wild. But an attorney, in fact, only needs one thing to be an attorney, in fact. You know what that is?
Limited power of attorney.
Well, power of attorney, just
okay.
It could be general, it could be limited, it could be just power of attorney. And that operates off of contract law. That power of attorney is a contract. Contracts are God. Like in the statutory, messed up, incorporated universe that we live in, like if you went into a church, it wouldn't be Jesus at the altar. It would be like the personification of a contract. Contracts are God in the incorporated universe. So when you have a power of attorney, like for example, there's a bunch of bar cards right now that are trying to hit me with unauthorized practice of law, which is hilarious. If you look at 15 U.S.C. 1, it specifically states that anyone who attempts to hinder or mess up or screw up or mess with anyone's ability to commercially operate or contract as they see fit is, if they're a corporation, it's up to $100 million. And if it's an individual, I think it's $10 million, which I've never seen anything anywhere that has higher fines than 15 U.S.C. 1. I have yet to see anything that comes close to how high those fines can go to. And that's because contracts and the infinite capacity to contract as you see fit is the God. It's the ultimate number one commandment of the religion called the corporate world. The number one commandment is contract, and the ability to contract is infinite. Now, they trick you into contracting into all these different things voluntarily, right? But the thing is that your ability to separate from those contracts, change those contracts, do anything you want within the confines of these contracts is infinite, completely infinite.
In that hierarchy of natural law, is a corporation that's not a living being or a living entity allowed to contract with a living person, a man or a woman?
Yes, because a corporation is considered a person as per the definition of the term person. So it's a person-to-person interaction in terms of the law.
So when you see state of Montana versus
John
Joe
Doe.
Smith, okay.
It's person versus person.
Now, is that John's...
The problem is that due process says that you're supposed to be faced with your accuser. So how can you be faced with your accuser if the person named United States? That gets a little bit complicated because then they say, oh, well, blah, blah, blah is a representative of blah, blah, blah. So you are facing your accuser because this human being represents this other person called the United States, and you're presented that human being. Kind of weird.
Well,
obviously,
it seems to be one of the most egregious human rights violations that we face is the concept of victimless crimes, right?
Yeah.
They just pull these codes and statutes out of their collective bungholes, and then now we're driving 35 into 20, and there's codes and statutes for that, but no one's been harmed, right? Going back to kind of that common law idea that if you harm someone, there needs to be restitution and some sort of, amendment. But if you're just living your life and you're not harming anyone, then it's a victimless crime. But we have prisons, just speaking of this country, prisons chock full. So many prisons, they have to open private prisons to just house more prisoners. And I would say, I don't know the stats, but a vast majority of them are in prison for victimless crimes, right? So it's like, there's something wrong with that in my mind.
Well, America has the highest percentage of incarcerated per capita, and it also has the most amount of laws than any other country in the world in terms of sheer size.
There you go.
So you could relate those two things together, but really, on a more realistic level, I think it's just because the prison system has been entirely commercialized and privatized. Like 50, 60 years ago, I think it was. I don't think it's anything new. They're just businesses. Those prisons are just businesses.
Right. And so it would serve the shareholders of those businesses, of the prison system, to create more codes, statutes, fake laws to basically ensnare the population and fill those prisons.
Yeah.
What about...
but the big joke of it is that if they just endorse their instruments, they wouldn't have to do all that. That's the part that gets so kind of goofy and silly, you know what I mean? Because the thing is that you can have somebody who wants to make $1 billion a year and they're in the prison system. You can teach them how to endorse their instruments, and now they don't need the prison anymore, and they can just shut up the prison and they can let all the prisoners go. Just commercial activity.
Right. I mean, it seems like our whole system of law is based in commerce. I mean, if you watch those court shows on TV, or if you've ever been to court, it's like the judge is essentially acting as a banker, right? And then if somebody's found guilty, they have to pay something, or they have to go to prison, and to get out, they have to pay a bond.
Well, the bond can be endorsed too.
Really?
Yeah, of course.
Interesting.
It's a negotiable instrument.
Oh my God.
The bond is a promise to perform. The performance is that the ens legis, the corporation called Brandon Joe Williams, is going to be inside of this escrow account called the jail cell for X amount of years. That's performance. You're performing on the contract. What's the definition of a payment? Performance on a contract or obligation.
Wow.
So by placing your body in a prison cell, you are paying the bond. Because the definition of payment is to perform on an obligation or contract. People think that payment means Federal Reserve notes. It's gotten absolutely nothing to do with Federal Reserve notes. I mean, literally, like, it couldn't be farther from the fact. Payment and performance mean the same thing. So every time you see the word payment, you just think performance. It's performance. Performance and payment mean the same thing.
So if you get a speeding ticket, it seems like that is a promise to perform. You promise to go to court. You can turn it into a promise to pay by just paying the ticket.
You've got it. And so it's an options contract.
Okay.
See? It's an options bond. See? Okay. So you can either perform or perform.
Right.
But the way most people would think of it is you'd either perform or you'd pay.
Got it.
But pay means perform.
Got it. Wild.
But it gets more interesting because, like, for example, traffic laws are what? Traffic laws are local ordinances to what nation? The nation called State of Texas. State of Texas is located where? In the District of Columbia. How do you move into the District of Columbia, State of Texas? Through naturalization, which is from 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A23. The term naturalization means the conferring of nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever. So you move into State of Texas because you stated, generally under penalty of perjury, such as when you moved here, or when you got a driver's license here, or when you did voter registration here, that you are a resident, which is funny because there's two terms, domicile and there's resident. Domicile means non-commercial, you live there, it's your permanent home. Resident means that you're there temporarily, you intend to return to your permanent home, which is the domicile, often for pleasure or business. So the word term resident has this teeny little commercial undertone to it. And that's the assumption. The assumption is that when they use the term resident, you're there temporarily for business or commerce related purposes. Boom, now they have jurisdiction because it's commerce. They don't ever use the term domicile.
Right.
They use the term resident.
That's like when you get pulled over.
So you sign under penalty of perjury that you are a resident of state of Texas. So because you're in state of Texas through naturalization, which is located in the District of Columbia, and because you're involved in a commercial activity, which can be assumed because you just said that you're a resident, not domicile, now there's these traffic codes. The traffic codes are commerce codes. You're there commercially because you're a resident. So you're driving commercially because you're a resident. So now, because you've naturalized into state of Texas, they write a complaint, which is a teeny little lawsuit for breach of contract. That's what a ticket is. A ticket is a complaint for breach of contract. It's a lawsuit for breach of contract. You naturalized here. Now you naturalized here commercially. And now you've broken this commercial crime that has no victim, but it is commercial and it is part of the commercial code. So the thing is that the assumption is that you're a resident of state of Texas.
Well, and when you get pulled over and they're going to ask for your registration, driver's license, and insurance, they always ask you, is this your home address? Do you live here?
That's right.
Right? Because they're basically, in a way, coercing you into saying you are a citizen.
But they don't know any of this, though.
It's just how they're trained.
You got to be careful with that because then now people are going to think like, oh, well, the cops know. No cop knows any of this information. Not a single one anywhere. And when they do, I've known some that kind of start learning some of this information and they go into work and they're like, and they start to think about things. They get transferred or they leave or something happens. Like they don't stay there and continue to do it once they start to learn this information. There's always like a transfer or a change or they leave or like something occurs there. It's not, they're not driving around. Once they learn about this, I promise you, I've never ever known any police officer or military that learned any of this information and then just continued doing what they were doing without any shift. It's never happened. I don't think it ever will happen. And the thing is that the more police that learn about this, that's when things are going to get really interesting because then what are you going to do when none of the cops want to go out and do traffic citations anymore because they're starting to get privy to the fact that there's something weird's going on here. They're not really, because I mean, you could be a cop and you can not go out and do a traffic beat and you can still, people call in and they're like, I'm getting robbed and blah, blah, blah. And like you get dispatched to go and no cop's going to have a problem with that. Even if they knew about the bond system and all the other horse blank, they would still feel totally comfortable going out and assisting some woman who's being molested. I mean, of course, right? So the thing is that as a police officer, you there's a lot of things within the confines of what you're doing that even when you do learn this information, it wouldn't bang on your morality, but traffic citations will very rapidly.
Right. I mean, they can't enjoy doing that either, right? I mean, if I'm like a well-intentioned peace officer and, I'm a teenager and I'm like, I can't wait to graduate high school. I'm going to go to join the force. I don't want to be out there as a land pirate, just fleecing people for $300 all day long in the school zone, right? It's like, I want to go out and protect the women and stop violence and,
Well, they're probably thinking like, we slow people down, we slow down the school zone, and we're protecting the children. And I'm a man because I'm protecting the children.
Well, school zone may be a bad example.
But you see what I'm saying, though? You see what I'm saying? It's
like running a stop sign in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m, where like it's impossible for anyone to be harmed by that, right?
Yeah, well, that's where it gets a little tricky because now what you're doing is you're requiring the officer to be the judge. And that's where it gets a little tricky, too, because it's like, what are you going to do? Hold court on the side of the road and try to figure out the merits of what is or what isn't? And that's why the codes exist in the first place, It's not a simple problem, It's a problem that needs to get sorted out. The way that I look at it is it's just The part that upsets me is that people are being essentially tricked into naturalizing. That's the most upsetting part to me, right? Because no one knows that and everyone's doing it. And once you naturalize, now you have this contractual agreement of which they write a breach of contract, which is a ticket. If I get pulled over, which at a certain point, you just don't even exist anymore to police officers. It's like a spiritual thing. Okay. I don't even know how to explain it. I probably couldn't get pulled over if I tried. I was going like 130 miles an hour right up next to this cop, like probably 4 weeks ago on my motorcycle. And I didn't want to go past him at 140 miles an hour. So I just kind of let off the gas and but I came up on him at probably 140 miles an hour. And then I slowed down to about his speed. And then I just kind of sped past him. He was going maybe like 75 and I went 85 past him. Right. But there's no fucking way. My bike's a straight pipe right out the side of the engine. There's no muffler or anything. It's loud. And just like you can see me coming up at 140 miles an hour, twice his speed almost, right? And nothing. Nothing. And I just never get nothing from, just like as if I'm just not even on the planet. It's like I'm a ghost.
Do you have California plates on that motorcycle? Or
no,
do you
diplomat.
Okay.
Diplomat. Ambassador at large. Diplomat plates, right? But the thing is that...
do you think that had anything to do with it? Or
you can't see it. It's
okay.
I have a hidden tucked motorcycle plate. Most people who don't ride motorcycles don't know what I'm talking about. It's like here's the way like a normal plate is. Like it's like here's the seat and here's the plate like in the back and it kind of hangs off. You can get these like tucked plates that are like this, and you can't even hardly see it. You got to and they're legal.
Got it. Got it.
But it's a tucked plate. Unless you looked underneath there, you wouldn't really totally see it.
While we're on the topic of cars, can you explain the legal difference in terms of terminology between traveling in an automobile, which I think every human being has the right to do without licenses and registration, all that, versus driving a vehicle?
So in the Republic of Texas, you do not need a driver's license. In the state of Texas, you do. So when you sign up for a driver's license, what you're doing is you're saying that I'm not in the Republic of Texas, I'm in the state of Texas.
Commerce versus non-commerce, basically,
yeah.
right? The state of Texas,
you're signing that you're a resident of state of Texas, which naturalizes you.
Is a corporation.
Yeah.
That's like a sub-corporation of the District of Columbia.
Of United States.
United States,
yeah.
Okay, right.
So the thing is that it's all voluntary. You volunteered to naturalize into state of Texas. And in the state of Texas, you need, and they'll tell you, in the state of Texas, to operate a motor vehicle, you need a driver's license. That's all true. All of that's true. But if you're in the Republic of Texas and you've never naturalized into state of Texas and you're not operating your automobile commercially, which makes it a motor vehicle, then you aren't in state of Texas and you don't have a motor vehicle.
And you're not driving.
Because the definition of driving from Title 49 is a person who operates a commercial motor vehicle. So the thing is that, and I forget the subsection on that. I would have to, if I had my computer and everything, I could find it, but I don't have that. I could find it real quick, actually. I don't want to
go for it.
Leave people hanging.
We'll put it in the show notes.
But yeah, driving, if I go onto my website and I go to...
onestupidfuck.com, by the way. Sorry for any parents listening with your kids. You probably lost them a long time ago because this information is pretty dense, but I know.
I have don'tbeaslave.com and I also have brandonjoewilliams.com. So you can...
great.
They just redirect too.
Got it. And then you end up with the cucumbers. I don't
have any service here, so I'm not...
That's fine.
But anyways,
yeah.
Driver, if you go on my state national resources page and you just type the find feature, Control F on a or Command F on a Mac and then Control F on a Windows, and you type in driver, and you may need to look a few times and look at a few things. One of them will have the definition of the term driver. I believe it's from Title 49. It's like 1.8 something /T or something like that. As a T somewhere in there for transportation. And you can look up the definition of the term driver for yourself from Title 49. So you aren't a driver, so you wouldn't need a driver's license. You aren't a resident of state of Texas, and you don't have a motor vehicle. And actually, some of the definitions of traffic even literally say that it's the commercial flow of automobiles.
But if you were, say, driving Uber or DoorDash, you would need a driver's license because you're participating in commerce. You're getting paid.
Well, I
to
normally
drive that
say yes to
customer.
that, but you can also, if you wanted to take it even a step farther, it's only when you're driving commercially in the state of Texas. So you would need to be a resident of the state of Texas, even.
Oh, interesting.
So you could go even farther with that. I don't normally talk about that too much because it's a little bit complicated, but technically you could get out of that too. Technically.
Okay, then one of the kind of workarounds that you teach in your course, the Contract Killers course, again, highly recommend for so many reasons, is the process of applying for a different type of passport, a diplomat passport, right? And then you get a passport card, and that essentially guarantees your right to travel, not to be a driver, not to drive a vehicle, but to travel in your own private property or private motor carrier, other words that we would use for what we commonly call a car or a truck, right?
It's a little complicated because technically a passport gives you the ability to travel non-commercially within the United States, but the whole country behaves as though it is the United States when it's not. So there are people even on my side of the equation which are like, F the passport, even that's part of their system, blah, 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 blah. Now, that's true, I think, but you're going to have a lot of fun on your hands. You're going to get pulled over. You're going to have all sorts of fun. You're going to be in court. You're going to have, which is fine if you want to do that. There's nothing stopping anyone from doing that. And I think you'll win everything. You don't even need a passport, in my opinion. Passport is in my own consideration, in my own opinion, it's the very, very low risk, very, very high reward proposition. Because if you look on the I-9 employment eligibility verification form, passport is all you need to work. You can work any normal job. You can get a hedge fund job. You can get this. You can get that. You can get any job you want. You don't need a social security number. You don't need nothing. All you need is a passport. Passport's good for 10 years, which is really nice. You don't need to do nothing. There's no test. There's no eye test. There's no nothing. 10 years, you're good to go. 10 years. Another benefit of a passport is you aren't getting out of the country on a plane without a passport. And you could litigate and you could sue and you could fight that fight for years and years and years if you'd like to, and you'll probably win. Or you can charter your own flights and you can get private jets and you can charter your own private jet. You probably wouldn't need a passport for something like that. But if you wanted to get on to commercial flights, you would need a passport to travel internationally, unless you wanted to fight like crazy and litigate like crazy. Maybe you could pull that off without having to do that. That's another benefit. Benefit would be something you could give police officers if they pull you over, something that they could use to actually look you up and that kind of thing. If you don't have that, they're going to do whatever they're going to do, essentially. So, in my opinion, I feel like the passport makes things a lot easier to interface between you and the corporate structure. But the passport itself is not necessarily even required. You couldn't get a bank account without a passport, though. If you have a passport, you can get a bank account, you can travel, you can do whatever you want, literally. And so passports are only issued to U.S. nationals, and that's per 22 Code of Federal Regulations 51.2. And then if you look at 22 USC section 212, it says passports will not be issued or verified for anyone who, whether a citizen or not, have pledged allegiance or permanent allegiance to the United States. Something along those lines, right? And then you have the definition of a U.S. national, which are the only people that a passport is issued to, as per 22 CFR 51.2. U.S. national is defined at 8 U.S.C. 1101 subsection A22. A U.S. national or national of the United States, which is the same term. U.S. national or national of the United States means exactly the same thing. It's the same term. Is defined as A, a citizen of the United States, or B, a person who, though not a citizen of the United States, owes permanent allegiance to the United States. I believe is almost every word exactly as it states in subsection A22. It could be a little bit off on a couple words. So passports are only issued to U.S. citizens or persons who, though not citizens of the United States, owe permanent allegiance to the United States.
Got it. And as we covered in part one of this, I think most people think, especially people coming from other countries, that becoming a U.S. citizen is awesome. So I want people to understand they can go back and listen to the context of that. But essentially, if you are a U.S. citizen and you have the old school type of passport, like what everyone that probably travels internationally has, the regular U.S. citizen passport, that you are actually treated in many ways as a second-class citizen. And so
a U.S. citizen is a voluntary employee or officer of the corporation, of the government. You work for the government. So like people like me that are U.S. nationals or nationals of the United States, basically all U.S. citizens work for us, basically.
So interesting.
We are essentially like the beneficiaries of that system, essentially.
So if you have
and that's why illegal aliens get all the crazy cool stuff that you're seeing all over the media.
Right.
Because they're not really illegal aliens. There's no such thing as an illegal alien. An illegal alien would be a person who has not conferred the nationality of a state upon a person after birth by any means whatsoever.
So all these disenfranchised people that, by the way, have been, it's so funny. You watch like when there's a right-wing government in place, they do all this can't say the word, intervention. They go and intervene in other countries and basically topple them and get them in debt and impoverish all of the indigenous people. And then when the left-wing government's in control, they use those people as pawns to get votes and collapse the borders and stuff. It's crazy to watch if you've been around long enough. But when you see right now these poor disenfranchised people coming over the border and they're given iPhones and a debit card, and now I saw something a couple of days ago. They can carry arms, right?
Yeah,
I think I texted
firearms,
you that, right? And you're going, wait a minute, I want that stuff. But they would be a U.S. national, not a U.S. citizen, right? Because they're nationalizing.
If they've conferred nationality of a state upon themselves after birth by any means whatsoever.
Which they can do by just saying that statement at the border.
That's correct.
Right. That's so interesting. Okay, going back to the passport. So say one has the U.S. national or national of the United States passport. This, they're, I think, from 3 to 6 stars or something, and no one knows what the stars mean.
Whenever I see anyone do any of these processes, they get either 3, 4, or 5 stars on the passport card.
Okay. And so back to the driving. Okay. Now, when I lived in LA for all those years that I was telling you yesterday when we were hanging out, I never got pulled over my entire life there because there's drive-by shootings and real crimes happening that the police are occupied with. When I moved to Texas, it's really annoying because if you speed, you will get pulled over and get a ticket. And I found that out in my first 2 weeks here. I was going like 5 over. The guy pulled me over. I'm thinking like, are you serious right now? I'm going 5. You really? And,
he's probably thinking, you California piece of ass, you know what I mean?
And I'm this like spoiled brat from California. But anyway, it kind of sucks to drive here in Texas, I'll be honest, because there's just speed traps everywhere. It's like a huge racket. So that is attractive to me as someone who likes to travel in an automobile for my own private, non-commercial activities. But I see people online, kind of the uneducated, kind of winging it folks. You'll see these YouTube videos of people fighting with the cop on the side of the road. They've taken their license plates off. They're doing all this like crazy sovereign citizen shit. They rattle off some sloppy Black's Law and, maybe hand them an affidavit that's notarized and the cop is looking at them like, you're going to jail. You know what I mean? It's like, there's a way to not do this right that I want no part of, because I'm not trying to be on the side of the road for 3.5 hours making a YouTube video arguing with the cop. I'd rather just take the ticket and, as we'll maybe talk about, just discharge the thing and be done with it. But let's say you want to go this route. You apply for that passport as you teach in your course. Then there's another element of it, and that is something I actually looked into, and they wanted, I think, an EIN, and I don't have an irrevocable trust yet with an EIN, so I didn't do it, but I went on the Department of Transportation, which is superior to the Department of Motor Vehicles, because I want to get my DOT number for a private motor carrier, and tell me where I'm wrong on this, and get a license plate that has my DOT number on it, get the passport card, buy the car outright or whatever, and get the MCO. And so I'm like totally self-contained traveler that has the real title to my car, not a certificate of title, but I am the owner. It's my private property. The Department of Transportation has authorized me to travel in my private property. it seems like if you did it that way, you're pretty much golden in terms of any minor traffic violations and things like that. Do I have that right?
Yeah, the police don't know any of that, but yes, that's correct.
I mean, that seems like a much less tumultuous way to go about cruising around the world than not having any of your contracts canceled and all your paperwork and shit in order and trying to argue with the cop that they don't have jurisdiction and yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, if you have a certificate of title, then the state owns your car. You donated it to the state and you have you are the beneficial owner, which if you look up the definition of what that means in Black's Law Dictionary, it means you have a security interest in the vehicle. So you are the beneficial owner. And then if you hand them a driver's license, that shows that you're a resident of state of Texas and that you're involved in a commercial transaction. And then if you have active current registration tags, that's even worse. So active current registration tags means that you are a willing and paying participant in the commercial activity called the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program, found in 34 USC 12611, which states that you are involving yourself in an entirely voluntary commercial transaction where you are basically the way that the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program operates, and you can look it up for yourself, 34 USC 12611. The way that registration stickers work is that you're supposed to tell the Department of Motor Vehicles essentially like a schedule of like who is going to be operating that motor vehicle at what times of the day of the week. And what the police officer is supposed to be doing, and they kind of do it, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they have no idea it has to do with the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program. They're supposed to be verifying that the driver of that motor vehicle matches what person is supposed to be driving that motor vehicle at that time of the week. And if it's outside of that time period of the week, find out why. And the whole point of it is to prevent the theft of motor vehicles. Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program.
Oh, interesting.
That's what registration is.
God, there's so many layers to this stuff, dude.
So the thing is that if you have expired registration, you are not part of the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program. They say right in the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program is that it's entirely voluntary, and they have to tell you that it's voluntary and that you waive all of your rights when you sign up for the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program, and they don't need any what they call reasonable articulable suspicion, RAS. They don't need any RAS to pull you over or to interrogate you or anything if you are a paying commercial member of the subscription service called the Motor Vehicle Theft Prevention Program.
Wow. So if you were not as a living human being under the jurisdiction, say, of the state of Texas, because you don't have a driver's license, you canceled it, you have your diplomat passport card, but your car is still registered and has plates and has registration tags on it, would you then not be subject to the jurisdiction of those statutes and codes, but your car could? Like, would they just leave you on the side of the road and impound your car?
It's called person jurisdiction versus subject matter jurisdiction.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So to be ironclad, though, it seems like if you had the passport, and then I want you to explain what the MCO is, but if you had the MCO and you had your official government issued DOT number, like you and the car are now out of jurisdiction. And as long as you're not harming anyone, you pretty much...
I talk about the MCO and the MSO a lot. I have an MSO for my motorcycle, but I do not have one for my car. My car was bought used. So I just sent in my title and told them to release security interest in the title and that the contract is over and I no longer find it beneficial. And I just kind of gave them some basic information as to like what I'm going to be doing and how this is going to work, and to destroy all the information, to destroy my name, to destroy the name of the ens legis. It is a copyrighted name. You can no longer use it or place it anywhere. You need to delete it out of all of your systems. The car, release all security interests. You have nothing to do with this. I'm no longer the registered beneficial owner of the vehicle, blah, blah. It's going into a private irrevocable trust. And I just sent them like a whole affidavit, and then I attached the title, and I wrote on it in big, huge letters, to be destroyed permanently destroy entirely, remove entirely from all computer systems. And I circled it. And then I sent all that in registered mail, because a certificate of title is a negotiable instrument.
Wow.
They say it's a security. I actually found some case law where they actually talk about how it is a security. I don't really know, because it shows security interest because you're a beneficial owner and they're like the trustee essentially. And it's like this whole thing. So it's a security, and you're supposed to send securities registered mail because it's like an original security. So I sent all that in with all the instructions and everything to the state of South Dakota. I had an out-of-state trust registration with the state of South Dakota, and I never heard anything. It's been 3 or 4 months. One of the pitfalls that people go through, and I go through a little bit too, is that you feel like you need some sort of acknowledgement. You really don't. As long as you have evidence that everything was sent, it's a novation. You've changed the contract. And by them not specifically sending anything back, like for example, I got my MCO, MSO for my motorcycle. I bought it brand new, and I negotiated that I wanted that thing in my hand and signed over with a wet ink signature from the dealership. And the general manager got involved, and he was fine with it, really. So I paid cash for it, and I got the MCO, MSO. But there was some document he had me fill out, and I only filled out part of it. And there was like a power of attorney part, and I didn't fill any of that out. I didn't really fill out much of anything on it. And I get a title in the mail with a registration tag, like maybe a month or 2 later. And I wrote back, "What in the hell is this? Why are you sending me this? You guys never got a copy of the MCO. I have the MCO, the original. You need the MCO to issue a certificate of title. Otherwise, certificate of what? You don't have anything to certify." So the thing is that they obviously they don't know any of this information either. They don't have a clue. They just punch whatever's in the computer or hit the buttons or click this or check. They have no idea what they're doing. So they send me a registration, and they send me a title, and I do the same thing. I write all over it, and I write the affidavit, and I send it all back, and it's like, you need to destroy all of this because I have a copy. I have a trademark, registered trademark on this name, and you can't put this name on anything because I have case law stating that the certificate of title is a security. So they're manufacturing securities with a registered trademark name that I never gave any authorization to do.
Name.
Yeah. So then 2 months later, they sent me back this form letter, and it says, "The employees of the Department of Motor Vehicles disagrees with your letter," and that all this stuff and blah, 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 blah. And I wasn't going to sue them, but like now, I'm definitely suing them. I'm going to sue them for manufacturing securities on a registered trademark infringement, copyright infringement. That's just a federal lawsuit. I'm going to hit them with, oh Lord, it's just going to be a blast. It's going to be so many different things. Copyright, federal copyright claim. I haven't filed all that yet because I was just trying to get my American Express stuff off the ground. Then I left to come here. So, but when I go back, I got DMV. That's going to be fun. I got the city of Glendale. I sent them a bill of exchange, and they sent it back and said, basically like, we don't even know what you're trying to do with this. So I'm just going to sue them. We'll figure it all out in court. I got DMV. I got city of Glendale. I got, I was going to sue the Federal Reserve, but then I kind of learned more about the OC-10 agreement, and I kind of learned more about that. So now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to actually fill out the OC-10 agreement. I tried calling them, but they wouldn't pick up the phone. And there's a district branch. So you have the 12 main Federal Reserve banks, and then you have the sub-district branches. You have one in Los Angeles. Because the main one that services all of California and Southern California is the San Francisco District Federal Reserve. And then they have a Los Angeles like sub-branch of the San Francisco Fed, right? So I'm thinking I'll just dress up real nice, like full head to toe, looking real sharp. And I'll just go down there and just like, can I get a rep? I'm looking to have an OC-10 agreement. I want to have a few questions I want to answer, and like, how do I set up everything for the collateral securities? And like, because I want to get window access this year. And
for those listening that are lost, what will that give you the ability to do?
Swap negotiable instruments for Federal Reserve notes.
So just create infinite money out of thin air.
So I have my own bank. Yeah.
All right. Back to the MCO. A friend of mine owns a car dealership, and I was like, what do you got to do as a consumer to get the MCO? And he said, well, you'd have to buy the car cash, and then we'll give you the MCO. But if you finance it, you're not going to get it.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. And the MCO, for those listening, and so I understand it, is of value because that then claims that automobile as your private property and gives you more rights essentially to travel about in your automobile.
Yeah, but if you special endorse the instrument, then the financing is immediately pays for itself, and then you can get the MCO without having to pay cash.
Right.
I didn't want to deal with all that though because it requires a lot of litigation. I wanted the motorcycle for that summer.
Got it.
So I just paid cash and got it done. I got the MCO.
You want to go through the whole rigmarole.
Yeah,
of
but if you want to
litigation
special endorse the instrument and then go to litigation and force them to and tell the general manager, you hold on to that thing because as soon as this litigation is done, I want that. They're going to be issuing that to me. You can even drag the general manager in to the lawsuit. Just I don't know if you'd name him as a party necessarily. Maybe you would, depending on the situation. But part of the stipulation would be the relief for the lawsuit would be that a court ordered. You could also just have the court order an order or subpoena to the general manager of that car dealership or motorcycle dealership to issue the MCO to you, and then you can walk in there with a court order. There's all sorts of things you could do.
That's cool. Well, when I started catching wind of this particular thing, because I really like the idea of just being free to travel in my automobile wherever I want, and not get pulled over for stupid reasons that aren't hurting anyone, et cetera. But I sent an email to the sales guy at my car dealership, who's a really nice guy. He's been very agreeable and hospitable. This is my second lease with him. No, this is my first lease with him. I turned in another one from a California dealer and got a lease here. And it's up in a few months. So I emailed him and said, hey, if I come in and just pay for this car, can I get the MCO? And he didn't answer my email. And he always answers my email. So I'm like, maybe he knows, maybe he's busy. I don't know. But it seems like they're not in a big hurry to hand those over for some reason.
Well, the general manager at the dealership that I bought my motorcycle at told me that he said upstairs he's got every MCO of everything he's ever sold.
Really?
Just sitting there.
Wow.
They're all just sitting in the attic.
Wow. Because basically, if you don't have that, you don't really even own your car, even if you paid cash for it, right? You're kind of almost like borrowing it from the DMV.
Well, I don't know exactly how it all works because with cars, in California especially, and with cars, you're supposed to send the MCO in when you register the vehicle with the state. If you go on the actual California state website and you go under registering a vehicle and how that all works, and they break it down in great detail, it says that the MCO, MSO has to be sent to the state. And then they issue what they call a jurisdiction title or state title. They say state or jurisdiction title. So that certificate of title is a state or jurisdiction title. And then the original MCO, MSO is the actual physical original title, which is why it's called a certificate of title. The certificate of title is the representation of the MCO or MSO.
Right, right. Does this work the same way with like a deed of trust for your home? Like we're financing this house right now, so I don't have the actual deed. I have some documentation that says...
Well, you have a certificate of deed.
Okay.
When you pay it off, you'll get a certificate of deed because you still don't own it after you pay it off. The county does.
Right. God damn it.
So you have to release interest from the county if you want to have a real deed.
Right. The deed, not a certificate of deed.
Well, at that point, you're writing your own deed at that point. Because the county wouldn't have anything to do with a fee simple title. That's what it's called.
Okay.
You can look that up online.
It's just crazy that we work our asses off to buy things and then we don't really own them.
The way it works is it's a commercial interface. It's a commercial exchange. So the county is helping you through permits and stuff to make sure that you don't kill yourself and dig up electrical lines or dig up a sewage line or break something or drown or kill yourself, or your building has an earthquake and it falls over. And if you need something, you're supposed to be able to call the county to get help with whatever it is that you
call an ambulance or
plus it has ambulance, plus it has fire department, plus. So you're not really. It's so funny they call it taxes, but it's not really taxes. It's a subscription service.
Property taxes, you mean?
Property taxes are a subscription service.
Okay.
So you're paying a subscription service fee in exchange for this whole kind of AAA package services.
Interesting.
Now, the thing is that as long as you consider that relationship to be beneficial, then it's a binding contract, which what is the God of the incorporated world? It's the contract, right? The second you go, I really don't think this is beneficial for me anymore. It's very, very clear. You only have a contract consideration is what is the glue that holds a contract together. Consideration is you gain something or I lose something. Kind of like there's a lose and a gain part to the definition of consideration or adequate consideration. You can look up adequate consideration in Black's Law. There's a lot of good information there. Consideration is only consideration until you no longer believe that it's consideration. It's completely subjective. So if they assume that you believe that it's consideration and you never directly and specifically and explicitly and ideally unemotionally, because that can make things very complicated, unemotionally tell them that I no longer consider these things to be consideration, thank you very much for all the previous time where you may have been under the assumption where I did believe that it was beneficial. But I'm sorry, but I no longer do. And we can argue about the past, but it's for most people, especially in Texas, especially the way you're telling me you think, you don't want to get into all that. It's just okay. Right now, I no longer consider this relationship to be beneficial. I no longer consider this to be consideration. So poof, this whole thing goes bye-bye. Now, at that point, if they force you to continue the contract after that point, now we are involved in an involuntary servitude, which is up to 25 years in prison. And you can just walk in there, you can take them to court, you can call the DOJ, and you can start putting people in jail.
Wow.
After that, but until you do that, it is just a subscription service and you're just paying for a subscription service, just like Netflix. And it's like waking up one day, freaking out, and then trying to put people in Netflix in jail.
Right.
And you never even tried to cancel your contract.
Right.
You just freaked out and you sued Netflix, this, and you try to put people in jail at Netflix. That's not how it works. Now, if you clearly and explicitly, and you have all the evidence that you've done it, told them that I no longer want to have this contract with Netflix, and I wish that you turn off my subscription and no longer charge me these negotiable instruments that you're pulling out of my account, and they continue to do so. Now at that point, there's a big difference between intent and not having intent. Like manslaughter, you can go to jail for a few years. Murder, premeditated with intent, bye-bye, right? So now at that point, did they have the intention to ignore your desire to no longer have that contract? And did they continue forward from that point? That's what the county's going to do. Now, when you can prove intent and they send you a letter and they say, Mr. Storey, what you sent us is blah, 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 and it's all BS and that you still owe us and blah, blah, blah. Now you've got a really solid involuntary servitude case.
That's crazy. But at the same time, if you just got your monthly property tax bill, for example, and you just ignored it and threw it in the trash, then you are now in breach of contract, essentially. And that's when they can put a lien on your property. And
well, they sue you for breach of contract.
Okay. Interesting. That's crazy, dude.
But you're not breaching the contract when you tell them it's over. You're ending the contract.
Right.
There is no breach of contract because the contract is gone. Because the only thing that holds the contract together is adequate consideration. You've already explained there is no adequate consideration any longer. So there is no contract. So how can they sue you for breach of contract when there's no contract to breach?
And would that be the case if you just did a novation, like an amendment to the contract, or you have to just 100%?
You can do whatever you want.
Oh, okay.
That's why I don't tell people what to do, because the only person that can answer that question is you.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Nobody else can answer that question.
So interesting.
Nobody else can answer. Oh, everybody should. It's like, no, like, I don't know I have no idea. What if your brother works at the fucking county and you don't want to upset your brother? I have no idea. There are a million different variations of what could, the only person that can tell you what you should do is you. I don't.
And then there's another piece in terms of real estate, right? The terminology, real estate versus land. And some of the people I've looked into in this space talk about filing a land patent on your property, right? Which is another way, I think, of moving it out of the jurisdiction, say, of Smith County or state of blank, right? To where it's actually just land that is indicated by the means and bounds of that particular piece of property. Would that essentially work in the same way? And if so, it seems to me if you've removed your property, your land, out of the jurisdiction of said county that you'd be paying property taxes to, that county is the one that's enforcing building codes and telling you what you can permit and not permit, et cetera. So say like this house had a land patent file going back 20 presidents ago or whatever, they signed it, right? And I get the original documentation through a forensic kind of audit of the history of
You can
who's
download
owned
it
this
off the
place.
internet for free right now.
Okay.
There's a government website that stores them, and you can look them up by address. Anyways, continue.
Could I build a skyscraper right here and be unfuckwithable?
Yes, but keep in mind that that's when you start moving into a common law. You are in common law. So if the skyscraper is so big that now your neighbor's property and they're growing sunflowers doesn't get any sun, now you're in a common law situation.
Right, because there's an injured
party. And in
party
Texas,
now.
someone's just going to show up over here with a shotgun and they're not going to call the cops.
They will.
So the thing is that that's a common law situation. And the thing is that in Texas, they still have common law here, pretty, and people think like that.
Yeah.
And it's considered acceptable and it's very normal here.
Yeah.
So if you piss off your neighbor and they do show up with their buddies in a shotgun, that's common law. That's between you guys.
That's a good point. That's a good point because you can't infringe upon the right. Like your rights end where someone else's rights begin, essentially, right? So if I'm infringing on my neighbor's ability to grow sunflowers or have a nice view, then we have a problem because I've just broken kind of the moral code that I claim to be living by.
Sort of like the beach in California, you have the houses are built like this so that everybody gets their view. What if you bought a house right in the middle and you built a skyscraper right there?
Right.
And you just effed everybody up the whole hill. Right. You might not have a problem with the police. It's legal to do it. But boy, your neighbors are going to come bashing your windows in and bashing your car windows in. And you're not going to have many friends. You're not going to stay there. You're not going to want to stay there.
Well, it's interesting.
That's common law.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I abide by that willingly. You brought up Texas and its uniqueness in some ways. And I know you don't domicile here, so you might not know all of it. But one of the motivations for us moving here in 2021 was to get out of California and all of the wild infringements on our rights that were taking place. And Texas was definitely more free. I mean, people were just kind of living their life. There's not a lot of mask enforcers and all this craziness. And as I started to, about this house and just interface with the government, the local government here in different ways, that you hear murmurs of the Texas Constitution. There's things here that are set in place, and certain rights are protected by the Texas Constitution, which I think is really interesting. The whole time I lived in California or any other state, I never heard anyone mention or any documentation.
There's a California Constitution.
Is there as well?
You also got to think too is that there's only a few states that their original names had the word republic in them. California Republic was the original name of California. The Republic of Texas was the original name of Texas. If you look at all the other states, most states are blank territory. Tennessee was originally called the Southwest Territory. You have the South Dakota Territory, I believe. I did look them all up, but this territory, blah, territory, blah, territory. Not a whole lot of them have the word republic in the actual name.
Right.
Texas and California are a couple that had it. And then the little teeny states in the upper right hand where the Mayflower landed, those were originally called Crown Colony of Vermont, Crown Colony of blank, Crown Colony of this, Crown Colony of. So the thing is like Tennessee is really fascinating because Tennessee's original name is called the Southwest Territory because it was southwest from all of those little states, right? So the thing is, when you say the Southwest Territory, that's the location. You could say Tennessee, that's the location. And then state of Tennessee is an entirely different location. Right. So there's not that many republics, but Texas is a republic, California is a republic, and I think there's probably maybe a couple other ones. I would need to look at the list again. But yeah, what does that mean? And how does that work? And why is it called republic? I haven't gone down that whole rabbit hole. What's between a republic and a territory? That'd be a good research point at some point in the future for someone to do or me to do, right? What's between a crown colony and a territory and a republic? And why were they named? Why was it named Republic of Texas? What happened? What is the original contract that occurred when, I've heard down the grapevine and stuff that Texas is one of the only places that never ceded its land to the Union or something like that. I don't know how that works, if that's true, or how does that work? And how does it, if you go on the BLMGLO lookup, I believe is what you can type into Google. That's the land patent database. And you can actually look up, your county, and then you look up your parcel of land and then the section of the parcel of land, and it'll literally pull up a full-blown PDF file of the original land patent. You can download it for free, or you can order certified copies for like $15.
That's cool. Yeah, I imagine, say, an area like this was probably...
You can't find Texas on the website.
Oh, interesting.
So there's some kind of a land thing with Texas specifically that has something to do with this that someone would need to get into more. But if there's not, if that's true and Texas never ceded the land, blah, blah, you just kind of write your own deed at that point. And then the way it works in law is that, if no one rebuts you writing your own deed and no one rebuts your claim of the property, it's yours. And then in the future, you would have what's called a justiciable controversy. If someone else said, no, that's not his, it's actually mine. Now you have two parties that are both saying that they have claiming that land. It's like homesteading.
Yeah.
Back in the day, America was born on, this looks good. Boom, you put a flag on the ground. Now it's yours.
Well, that's interesting.
That's it.
One of the things that I found cool about Texas is, and it's really, I think it's in the Texas Constitution, they have something called a homestead exemption.
Yeah.
And you have to, file for it. And it's not just automatic. Like there's shit you have to submit to the county, to Travis County, in order to qualify. And it doesn't stop your property taxes, but it puts a cap on them every year so that if property values, real estate value, et cetera, goes way up, they can't raise your property taxes in proportion to the value of the property. They can only raise it a certain percentage every year.
That's all just, if you don't want to be a part of that contract, then you just end your subscription.
Yeah. That sounds a lot cooler.
But keep in mind, now, if you end your subscription, now if you want police services, you're going to have to create a private contract with the police station. You got to drive down there, which you should anyways, meet your local sheriff, and say, Sheriff, I got a fee simple title on my property, but I would like to create a little contract with you guys so that if I'm ever in trouble or something happens, you guys are allowed to come on the property to save my life or whatever. If you want that, you may not want that.
Right.
Ambulance services and fire services is the same thing. If you have a fee simple title and you've done the whole thing and you've released everything from the county and your house is burning, flaming wreckage, the fire department can't legally come on your property. Your property is legally a separate nation.
Right. They'd be trespassing on private property.
It'd be international terrorism. Yeah.
Wow.
So I've heard stories of the police and the fire department. Your address doesn't even come on their computer anymore. It's taken out of the computer entirely on a fee simple title.
Wow.
Because it would be considered an international crime, and it could be interpreted as international trespassing, and that could be interpreted as an act of war between two countries.
Wow. So
very serious. Very, very
interesting.
Serious. So at that point, it's an international contractual relationship between the person with the fee simple title and the local police department or the local fire department. And when you create that, there might be a subscription fee that you would need to pay in exchange for the services.
Interesting.
It's still a contract.
Right.
It's always going to be a contract.
What I'm gathering from our conversations, this one and the one before, the world in which we live, that people refer to as the matrix, right? This complex web is just all contracts.
Everything.
That's what life
voluntary
is.
Contracts.
Right.
Voluntary
that we
contracts.
don't know are voluntary.
Or we're not expressing that. When you say this is BS and I don't like paying, and then you pay it, what speaks louder, the words or the actions?
The actions.
So
yeah,
you're not. People think like, oh well, I am trying to tell them that it isn't adequate consideration. No, because if you're paying them, then you are telling them it's adequate consideration.
I think we talked about taxes in our first conversation, but because we have talked about finance and money and monetary system and all this, I think it would be interesting in our last few minutes here to talk about, and of course you show how to do all of this in your course. I mean, literally, like, here's the document you download, here's how you fill it out, here's where you send it, here's how you send it, and so on. But I think many of us, out of some sort of instilled moral obligation or some sort of implied virtue that to pay taxes is to be a good person and to make your contribution. So even though we don't like it, and you're like, holy shit, you get your paycheck, you look at all the withholdings, you're like, I made $5,000 and now I have 3,500. It's like, where did it go? What happened? And we just go, well, I'm paying my dues to exist here and, help build the roads and schools and all that stuff. Based on my research of you and some other people, have learned that when we pay taxes, it doesn't actually go to the infrastructure of the country. It goes essentially to pay off an old debt to
the interest on the debt.
The interest on the debt to England, I'm assuming, right?
I don't really know. I mean, I never really.
Okay.
I just know it's on the interest on the debt. It just You pay it and it just vanishes. That's really what happens.
And then furthermore, and again, I think we did touch on some of this, but just because it fits in this conversation, paying income tax is voluntary.
Yes.
Right? And is only required by U.S. citizens, who you said are essentially an employee of the United States or officer, right? This privately held corporation, for-profit corporation, you can look it up on Duns and Bradstreet, located in the District of Columbia.
Yeah.
So if you cancel all of your contracts that you have as your birth certificate, all caps name, with the United States corporation, it's not that at that point, you're just not paying taxes. You're actually not required to even file taxes, let alone pay them, because you don't have a tax liability legally and lawfully.
Yeah, so it's like a lot of times when people share this information with their friends and family, there's a particular page of the IRS website called the frivolous tax arguments and tax protesters or something ridiculous. The term that they use throughout that entire frivolous page is the term taxpayer. Taxpayer, 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 taxpayer. No one notices it. Taxpayer is defined in Title 26 of the Code of Federal 26 USC 7701 subsection A14. The definition of the term taxpayer is any person who is subject to any internal revenue tax. So the thing is that the term tax liability is a person who is subject to any internal revenue tax. So a taxpayer would be a person who has a tax liability. If you do not have a tax liability, then you do not meet the definition of the term taxpayer. I've never seen any term that is specifically and explicitly communicated to define someone who is not a taxpayer. So a lot of times when you see people saying it, they just say non-taxpayer. So a non-taxpayer, which is just a made-up term, I don't think it's an official term.
Right.
Would be by definition the opposite of the definition of the term taxpayer from 26 USC 7701 subsection A14. And a non-taxpayer, by flipping that definition on its reverse, would be defined as any person who is not subject to any internal revenue tax. A non-citizen national of the United States is a non-resident alien. And if a non-resident alien is not making any income, which is practically undefinable because a Federal Reserve note is a security, doesn't have any intrinsic value in law, and the IRS and everybody else has no interest in having anything to do with gold and silver coins. They want to pretend as though gold and silver coins don't exist.
I wonder what would happen if you did file your taxes, you admitted to a liability, and you voluntarily sent them a big box of gold and silver coins for $12,000. Would they take it?
Well, no. The better question is, let's say that you filed a tax return and stated that you had received 487,000 silver coins as income. You'd probably have people blowing their heads off with shotguns and stuff on the IRS, because the thing is that the government and the IRS, everyone is insane on the subject of gold and silver coins. It's like literally a point of complete insanity when it comes to the government. When you read about gold and silver coins and you read about how it works and anything about gold and silver or gold abrogation, it's just madness. It's like it doesn't make any sense. It's pure madness. And then you go on the Federal Reserve and they'll tell you that the Congress has never defined lawful money. Just madness. Madness.
That's crazy.
Lawful money is defined as gold or silver coins.
Thinking about that term taxpayer, right? How that is a specific definition. I'm thinking about different tax forms. Your tax return extension or when you file or W-9s, they'll always say something to the effect of signature of U.S. person or signature of U.S. taxpayer.
That's right.
And so by signing under that line and not crossing it out or doing some other kind of endorsement, you're voluntarily saying, yes, I qualified to be part of your program.
You're saying I have a tax liability.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's the catch for many people is like, you can't just not pay taxes. They'll come throw you in jail and take all your shit. That is only the case if you are a, quotes, taxpayer or U.S. person.
And you can only become a taxpayer by naturalizing and electing to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purpose of determining your income tax liability, which comes from 26 CFR 1.871-1 subsection 1 or A1, that first section. It says there that, however, a non-resident alien individual may elect to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining their income tax liability. And that's where the revocation of election comes in. So the revocation of election, which is a term that many people hear quite often in this space, it's a revocation, which means an eliminating of something previous or a previous contract or a previous whatever of election. The election means volunteering to be treated as a U.S. resident for the purposes of determining your income tax liability. So you volunteered. It's revocation of election means the removal of volunteering.
And in your course, there's a couple of different things that you talked about. One of them is a form called a Form 56 that you can fill out in a specific way, send that to the IRS. And then there was another one that's more of an affidavit.
I strongly recommend people use the affidavit rather than the Form 56. It's not the end of the world, the Form 56. If anyone has sent in a Form 56, I recommend that you do go ahead and send in the new affidavit that I released 2 or 3 or 4 months ago or whatever it was. I didn't have a revocation of election that I had actually publicly released up until fairly recently.
And on your state national resources, which is essentially like a living book. I mean, you're updating it all the time. And it's
the theory page is like that.
The theory page, right. And it's just, it just goes on and on and on. It's like a lot of information, which I'm glad you do video and audio content like this because you really got to be a reader. And I think that's why up until recently, this was a very fringe sort of study for people because everything was only written. These like kind of, older patriot types and stuff that really learn the law like you have, real law, common law, et cetera. But it's like a lot of reading. And I think that's important to kind of understand before you start playing games in this realm and make mistakes and get yourself in trouble. But for anyone that does like to read, like that particular section of your site pretty much is the key out of what we call the matrix. And I think that's why I'm excited. I know that's why I'm excited to talk to you and people like you. We've got Brother Truth coming on in a few weeks, another guy in this space, because everyone's feeling like the system is rigged, especially over the past 4 years, and that our rights, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, basically are toilet paper. Because everyone is classifying themselves and volunteering into these contracts as a U.S. citizen, right? And naturalizing. But up until very recently, the only way you could ever figure this out was like a lot of reading on poorly designed websites that you can't barely navigate and are hard to find. And that's why I've personally never done any of this, even though I've been aware of it, because it's just like, dude, how do you even follow this?
Yeah.
So where do you see this movement going now that people like you are out here with social media and doing podcasts and making it more accessible?
With special endorsements, you can buy everything you've ever wanted without having to do all this crazy, goofy stuff that hurts people and sell drugs and human traffic and have prisons. And you can just stop. You can just stop it all. You can just everybody can just and the Federal Reserve can just be the organization that just pays everyone's bills and. That's how it's supposed to be. Since 1933, the Emergency Banking Act, the government, and if you look at 18 U.S.C. 8, obligations and other securities of the United States, you'll see that every single bill, every single promissory note, every single security, every single thing in the entire country is all obligations or other securities of the United States. You've never gotten a bill that's yours in your entire life. Every single bill you've ever gotten is actually the government's bill.
Crazy.
Unless your buddy says, hey, I'm going to sell you this bicycle and I'm going to send you an invoice and, that's still different. But besides that would be the only thing that would be a private debt. Everything else has been a public debt. And the definition of the term credit, if you look at it up in the law, is the ability or permission to defer payment or performance of a contract or obligation to a later date. Since they took away all the gold and silver coins in 1933 through the Gold Abrogation Act and the Emergency Banking Act, we can no longer actually truly pay. So in exchange, in order to solve that problem, we have been permitted to defer payment of anything forever to an infinite amount.
It's crazy.
And that is the world that we live in.
Which is, if you think about it, kind of a cool system. If
Kind of a cool
you
system.
know how to play the game. I mean, it's essentially like if socialism worked, this is how it would work.
Exactly.
It's just you have corrupt players that are not disclosing how the game works. They use the Monopoly board in some of your demonstrations. Like, we're on the Monopoly board, but no one told us the rules and who's actually running the game. But the game itself, if you know how to play it, is actually quite equitable.
Yeah.
That's the crazy thing. Like, the Matrix doesn't actually suck. It only sucks because we don't know how to play the game.
You can have anything you want, and you simply defer payment of whatever it is that you want forever. And you have infinite capacity to do so. Wow. So I could buy anything I want, and I can defer payment until long after I'm dead. It's all legal.
Right. I mean, I guess at the end of that kind of Ponzi scheme, though, since debt isn't real, you can't really pay debt. Money, as we know it, isn't real. The jig is going to be up eventually, right? In 60 years, 300 years. I mean, there's going to be a point where the whole thing just collapses in something new, whether it's cryptocurrency or whatever it is, has to be born out of that, because the usury fiat debt system is not infinite, right? It's infinite maybe in our lifetimes, as you described, but at some point, the bottom's going to fall out of the thing, isn't it?
I don't know. I mean, if because you're going to have inflation, so if everything was free, then a sandwich would be $80 trillion in 10 seconds. But who cares? Because at that point, 80 trillion or 100 trillion or 500 trillion, it doesn't matter, because the Federal Reserve is going to take care of it. So why would it matter? The Federal Reserve becomes the trustee for literally basically everyone in America.
So crazy.
So if you have an OC-10 agreement, that's it. You defer payment on everything you've ever had till the end of time, and you can buy whatever you want, mansions, planes, and you just defer payment on that plane till after you're dead.
Nuts. All right. For people that have heard the first episode and this part two, because I've seen some of them when I posted stuff about this topic or about your interviews, et cetera, where people say, "Oh, my cousin tried to do that and they lost their house," or my boyfriend got thrown off in jail because he tried to pull the passport shit when he got pulled over, right? It's like there are people out there who seem to be taking little bits of this information and not really canceling all their contracts and not, as we say, correcting their status, and try to kind of play the game in a half-assed way and do get themselves in trouble. So for those listening that are like, "Oh, this sounds awesome, I want to do it," what are the actual risks involved? Because it's going to sound to a lot of people that are very programmed by this system that you're going to get in trouble by someone or something if you do any of this stuff. Like if you step out of line.
You can get in trouble by not being clear. You can get in trouble by not clarifying previous contracts. You can get in trouble by being convoluted and emotional and sending in, this whole sovereign citizen thing where the people are sending in 900-page documents that go on and on and on, and you can't even figure out what they're trying to say. That's actually a real issue. Because the thing is that if I'm supposed to clearly and openly communicate to you that there's no longer any adequate consideration, and I go on for 900 pages of vitriol and screaming, how are you even going to be able to understand the fact that I have said that this is no longer adequate consideration and that this contract has ended? If you can't understand, because I'm literally a raving lunatic, basically at that point, I'm literally insane at that point as per the definition, because you can't even determine what I'm trying to say, and it's just like I'm just this hostile, crazy mass of God knows what, and it's like a foreign alien, basically, of an individual. Then how are you supposed to understand that I have decided that it's no longer adequate consideration and that the contract has ended? If you can't understand that, and you're like, "Well, I don't know what he's talking about, but we're just going to keep going as we've been because I don't know really what he's trying to say," would that be an involuntary servitude situation? No. Because you didn't clearly and quietly or whatever, you didn't clearly delineate. Consideration is what holds together a contract. I have considered this consideration through essentially acquiescence, and you have assumed that I have considered it consideration, and I have never rebutted that assumption. I am here today to communicate very clearly that nothing that you do at all at this point is considered consideration to me at all. Period.
So thorough and clear communication and an understanding of the law, not just getting a few catchphrases and trying to throw it at a
Plus,
judge.
if you
or a
freak
cop.
out, people don't want to listen to you. So that can also get complicated too. You can
Right.
say, fuck you, I don't want to, this isn't, consideration and la la la, and there's all these laws and there's all this la 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 la, and they don't like totally get it because there's all this other stuff in there and it's like confusing and they don't know either, right? So the thing is that you may need to educate them too. It's like, well, there has to be consideration in order for there to be a contract. I am here to tell you today, and I'm going to tell you in writing as well as verbally. And I'm going to send it to you, registered mail or certified mail, make you sign for it. So I have evidence that you have received the fact that I have clearly communicated that this is not adequate consideration. I do not consider any of this consideration at all. Now, you would let them know that, at this point, that you're giving them orders, direct and clear orders, that they are to, I'm no longer the beneficial owner, and that you are to release all security interest on this property. It's going into a private irrevocable trust, and it will be held under a fee simple title. And I have no interest in contracting with you at all whatsoever. I will privately contract with police, ambulances, and other things. If there's anything else that I need, I may come to you. I'm willing to pay you fees on delivery for specific services. Let's say I do need some sort of an evaluation for something, for a house, for this, for a sewer pipe. I will pay for those ad hoc or a la carte from this point forward. But the subscription service package deal is over. You can put all that in an affidavit. You can be very clear as to what it is and what it's not and how it is. And then after that point, you can even put it in there. If this contract is forced and these things are not done, after this point, we are looking at an involuntary servitude charge from Title 18, because now you are forcing me to perform something that I am no longer voluntarily participating in.
Got it.
I didn't list it any I didn't laws and papers and 487 pages of attachments and tomes and screaming and spitting all over a window. None of that was involved in that at all whatsoever.
Well, that's something that I think is really healthy and positive about your approach, is you're always stressing diplomacy and getting out of this mindset of being at war with the corporation called the United States and all of its subsidiaries of counties and cities and states and all that, right? It's like, I think you've described it as, it's like mommy and daddy energy. Like, you're actually not going to war with them. You're just educating those people, because the people that are getting this documentation, the people that you're talking to on the phone, like, they're not at the top of the pyramid, right? Everything's
They don't know any of this
compartmentalized.
information.
So they get your
If
weird...
you assume they do, it's a problem.
Right. And they get your weird 75-page affidavit with all this emotionality and vitriol. It's like, it's not going to go well for you, because that person doesn't even understand. All they understand is like the energetics of the way in which you're approaching them to solve a problem or to amend a contract, right? So it seems to me that on a spiritual level, that there's like part of the freedom is contractual, right? And getting your true, claiming your inherent God-given rights, right? That's what we all kind of want out of something like this. But there seems to be another level of satisfaction in ending the war with the state. It's like, we don't have to be at war with them. We just have to change our relationship.
Yeah, and when you educate people, like who you are going to be talking to, if they're willing to be educated, they have to be willing to be educated. When you educate them, now they're starting to be like, what the F is all this? And they start asking questions, and you can actually create insurgents right in the system. So if you really want to be at war with the system, all you do is just educate the soldiers of the other side.
Right.
That's the best way to be at war if you really think about it. Educate the soldier and then walk away. And then just that soldier is going to tear through the ranks of whatever it is that's going on the other side to some unknown level, to some degree or another. So the thing is, the problem is that most people spend time trying to educate someone who is not willing to be educated. And that's an issue. You can't do that.
I've watched in some of these, situational videos wherein somebody gets pulled over and most of them that I've seen have a really bad attitude and are dicks to the police, and it doesn't go well.
Yeah.
Those that have a sense of diplomacy and are friendly and respectful when they're pulled over, and again, I'm just using the car example because those are the only ones you can really see in real time. I don't have court footage, people dealing with the judge or whatever. When the subject who is pulled over is respectful and really knows their shit that you're describing, it's not uncommon that at least one of the officers, typically when they have to call a superior over, then they're like, well, will you explain this to me? And they get actually curious about it.
Yeah.
Right? Because like you said, they don't know.
There's not that many people that, plus you got to think too, like let's say you are a police officer. Let's say you're curious about this stuff. Every time you ask someone who seems like they may know something about it, they just totally freak out and scream at you and they don't make any sense. So you stop asking people. And then one day you come across somebody who, wow, like this guy seems pretty calm. He seems to be able to understand the information and explain it in a really simple way. And then they ask, but they're thinking in the back of their head, they're going to ask this question and they're going to get cannonballed. So they don't ask.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, if you put yourself in the position of someone who, say, has gone to police academy and has been unknowingly kind of indoctrinated into a system that is not fair in the sense that it lacks disclosure, as we've been talking about, right? So they're just trained to get you in their jurisdiction by asking you questions, and you don't know what the Fifth Amendment is. So you're like, yes, my name is Luke Storey in all caps, and I live in the state of Texas, in the county of so-and-so, right? And they're not trying to trick you. That's just how they're trained, right? And so if you're kind and respectful and you really have some grounding in this information and you really understand law and understand your true valid rights, it seems like if that's a somewhat thoughtful, kind person and you can put yourself in their shoes and understand that they really are just doing their job because they don't know what their job actually is, that you could start to build rapport, right? And have much more peaceful interactions with that side of the fence that many of us, frankly, resent or in some cases hate because it seems so unfair. And I think every human being likes to feel like they have inherent rights to just exist on the planet. And when we view the people that are we're volunteering to give up our rights, then we view them as the enemy. But there's a sense of self-responsibility when we start to educate ourselves and go, well, I've actually signed away my rights and all they're doing is just agreeing with the contract that I agreed to.
All they're doing is administering, most of the time, all the police are doing during a traffic stop is administering the motor vehicle theft prevention program of 34 USC 12611.
Got it.
That's really what they're doing. They don't realize it. But if you read the motor vehicle theft prevention program and then you look at what the police officer is trying to do and what kind of questions he's asking, he doesn't even know it, but that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to administer the motor vehicle theft prevention program.
Well, damn, dude. I knew this was going to be a lot of information for me and everyone listening to digest. I feel like we could go on for another 4 hours. So don't be surprised, people, if there's a part 3 coming at you soon, because this is just, this information is just so dense and it's not the type of information for me that is easily assimilated. It's
I understand.
There's a lot of repetition and a lot of unlearning, like we did Cal's podcast yesterday, The Great Unlearn. A lot of learning about this kind of type of law to me is you have to throw away so many things that you think you know or things about which you're just mistaken and ill-informed. So it's like 50% getting rid of your old ideas and 50% adopting a new set of ideas. So it really does take some deep digging and just open-mindedness to even grasp this. So thank you for, your dedication to becoming so knowledgeable about this and presenting it in a way that is understandable for a knucklehead like me and hopefully some of the people listening.
Yeah, and I think I'm sure because the way that your show is, I'm not too familiar with everything that you go over in your show, but I'm sure a lot of this comes down to self-esteem, self-respect, and self-appreciation. Because if you don't have self-esteem, self-respect, and self-appreciation, you won't allow yourself to step into the freedom of which this information will give you. And if you don't have an appreciation for your fellow man, you will not be very thrilled about the fact of them getting a hold of this information and them having the freedom that's also involved in this information. So a lot of it, I feel like more so than anything else, it's those two facts have to grow and be a part of this. Because if they're not, then I know some people, I haven't had that many, but I know some people who get absolutely terrified of the fact that I'm sharing this information because they think that all the vicious dogs are going to get out of the kennel. But I really, it's just like here in Texas, everybody's got, arms everywhere. And it's like, if it really was an issue, we'd all be, there wouldn't be a single soul alive in this entire state. And you can go the same thing anywhere else. It's the same thing anywhere else. The fact that people are driving around, the fact that these things are happening, and you could drive across town and not get murdered 10 times. It just goes to show you, if everyone was trying to just wipe everybody off the face of the earth, it would have already been done. So I just think that, trusting your fellow man and trusting your fellow man to do the right thing or the correct thing when given the correct information, I think is a big part of this. Because if you think that by releasing people, you're basically unleashing the angry bully XL that's now going to go out and maul kids to death.
The Kraken.
That's what some people, not that many, believe. Yeah. And that's the issue, because that's the way the entire judicial system operates. The judicial system and the police operate as though they're holding back all the Krakens. That's the issue. The issue is the perception that everyone is evil, and we have to hold everybody back from committing the basic evil actions of which every person is composed of. That's the greatest falsity of all.
I agree. Did I send you the book, The Greatest Superstition by Larkin Rose? I got to send you that book. It's a whole other conversation, but the premise of it is that we don't need an overarching controlling government at all. Like no left, no right, like just basically anarchy. People think of anarchy as chaos, but anarchy is just a lack of government.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then we think, well, we can't trust our fellow humans to behave.
Yeah.
So we're going to get fellow humans to control us all and have authority over us.
Yeah.
You think they're going to be any different than the average person? Anyway, it's a whole conversation.
That's beautiful.
But I like what you're saying about, that educating oneself and taking these kind of steps is an act of self-love. It's also, to me, something that's very appealing about it is taking responsibility for oneself. I know in my life, there have been situations in which I place myself through my own ignorance or selfishness in a position to be harmed and have felt like a victim. And of course, people are victimized innocently as well. And I've had my share of that. But most of the things that happened early in my life when I was a drug addict and so on, I felt like they're doing it to me. I'm the poor victim. I'm just minding my own business. When if I look a little bit deeper and apply some self-honesty and take responsibility, I see that there were moves that I made that put me in a position to be heard, right?
Yeah.
And in that is like the end of the feeling of being victimized.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, okay, well, there's all this law you can study and there's steps you can take to extricate yourself from this what seemingly unfair system. To do so it seems like it would just melt away your fear and resentment of the state, and you don't feel like a victim anymore because you're taking responsibility for the contracts that you enter into. So it's like beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it's overwhelming to me. As I've told you, the whole thing is just like, God, how do you even do it? But it is really inspiring and interesting when you look at it from self-love, self-responsibility, and doing everything you do in your life under the premise of do no harm and the golden rule. I mean, like, could it be that simple? I think it actually is.
Yeah, and when you set up all the contracts and you're clear on all the contracts and you contract the way you see fit in every area of your life, you essentially are operating as a king, which is why the term sovereign is used, because the sovereign means king. The king is the person, essentially, if I want to give my definition of the term king, what is the term king or queen? What is the definition? It's a person who clearly and openly, morally and ethically handles and communicates clearly, without hostility and without anger, without frustration, every single aspect of every single contract in every single area of their life. And then ideally, they actually stretch out and assist other people to do the same. That's the definition of a king.
I like that. Hot damn, dude. Well, thanks for educating us today on how to become kings and queens. You guys can find the show notes again at lukestory.com/Brandon2, the number 2. And we're going to link out to every possible thing we covered today. There'll be some long show notes.
It's going to have his work cut off for him.
I apologize in advance to the production team, but thanks, dude. Thanks for coming by. Great to see you here today.